30 Years of Watchtower Slave, Chapter 15, entitled A 7-Step Program. And the first subheading is Use of the Phonograph is introduced. Watchtower was kind of getting the bad rap that they were booksellers. It wasn't unfounded, it was all true, but Watchtower wanted to separate from that. So the answer to this was found in the use of the phonograph as an opener in the door-to-door ministry. This wasn't anything new, it was just another avenue of what they had already been doing. They would buy radio time on stations and eventually ended up having their own radio station where they would play Judge Rutherford's speeches. But since it was kind of crazy and wacky what Judge Rutherford was saying, less and less radio stations were willing to give Watchtower any time on the radio. I wouldn't blame them. If you read some of the literature back then on what Judge Rutherford was denouncing upon Christianity and religion in general, I wouldn't give them much playing time either. But anyway, so these larger radio stations refused to sell time to the Jehovah's Witnesses. So in this manner, radio was becoming increasingly ineffective as a way to propagate their propaganda. So the money that was once spent on radio time was now being used on phonographs and recordings. The next subheading is not given to generosity. So the statement that the society was discontinuing its payments of radio broadcasts was kind of misleading, because in fact most of the local congregations or companies, as they were called back then, were paying for their own time. The Watchtower Society never paid the bill. So when statements were coming out that the Watchtower Society was discontinuing its payment, well, that really wasn't true, because as mentioned earlier, the Watchtower Society doesn't pay for anything. And of course, Watchtower would always find scriptural justification in their policy of never paying for anything. I'll read this direct from the book. It says, when in 1941 I founded the W.J. Schnell Company with the intent to supply Bible versions and research volumes, I was flatly and firmly ordered by the service department in 1944 to desist from selling books, for myself of course. It was entirely agreeable that I continued to sell books for the society as I had done for the past 22 years. I firmly rejected this attempt to curb me in making a living in the only way I had ever learned to do under the society's own tutelage. In 1951, they finally came out and definitely condemned the methods of my company. So hypocritical. We see that today. There's websites out there where you can buy Jehovah's Witness field service bags and all these other things. This is what the author did. He set up his own company, and the Watchtower took a firm stance against him. So the next subheading is entitled Benefits of Censorship. So back to the phonograph. There was a powerful appeal to people in general by the use of this phonograph. It kind of gave the witnesses a shot in the arm with their ministry. A witness would play a recording first, discuss it for a little while, and then offer a book or magazine or publication or anything which would provide further information on the topic. So if censorship, if handled right, is the best advertising for huge sales, but it completely whitewashed. At the same time, it whitewashed the Watchtower Society as being a book-selling company. So not only did the censorship provide a way out of this label as a book-selling company, it also gave them a shot in the arm, also a boost, because when something is censored, well, people want what's censored. The next subheading is entitled 7-Step Introduction Program. I won't go into too many details on the particulars of each step because this would make this a pretty lengthy video, but I'll tell you the steps. The first step was getting the books into the hands of a person. Any method that achieved that result was acceptable. Step number 2 was the back call, or as we call it today, the return visit. You might be more familiar with that term. The third step is to get the person called on, or the return visit, to agree to a weekly study with the book that he had purchased. Step number 4 was the area of book study. This is no longer an avenue or step required because it was integrated into the midweek meeting. So we no longer have the congregation book study, but that was the case for many, many years. The 5th step was to lead the person into a wider area of Watchtower indoctrination. And this was done at the Watchtower study on Sundays, usually at the Kingdom Hall. This is where the witnesses say the meat and potatoes are. The new light is discussed and doctrine is expounded on, and so on and so forth. So study and then get the people to the Kingdom Hall, especially to the Watchtower study. The 6th step is getting the person alienated and separated from anyone else that isn't a Jehovah's Witness. He needed to be inside of God's organization, and at the same time, everyone on the outside was to be doomed to everlasting destruction. So getting that mindset of us against them. And then once all this is accomplished, the last step is baptism, officially becoming one of Jehovah's Witnesses. The next subheading is entitled The Result. So when 1938 rolled around and the theocracy was decreed and all congregations passed a resolution that they would follow the Watchtower Society and accept all instructions from them. This was done so by a resolution and a vote. Well, now this became a New World organization, which would expand to become a New World Society. In actuality, it was nothing more than a dictatorship of the faithful and discreet slave class in Brooklyn, New York. So the author says that as a company servant in New York from 1936 to 38, he was busy helping Bethelites develop the back call or return visit and develop the congregation book study, the use of the phonograph recording, and finally the very effective 7-step program of developing an organization of human robots. Very interesting stuff. So this is going to conclude this chapter, and please stay tuned for the next one. Thank you for taking time to watch and listen to this presentation. Post your comments, like and share this video, subscribe to my channel, and stay tuned for the next chapter.